Hello there, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Sunday, July the 28th, 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting another live stream. I hope to see some of my friends joining us for a nice conversation about Brazil, immigration, and real estate. I see we got 5 likes already. It looks like a very good start. We're just getting started and we have 5 likes here already. A couple of viewers. I'm sure we're gonna be getting more viewers as we go along. As usual, just sharing some feedback or like some stories about other people who are in a similar journey as you. So I just had a consultation with a client. She's from the United States. She bought a property in Rio de Janeiro. It wasn't in the city of Rio de Janeiro, it was actually in the countryside of Rio de Janeiro. And it wasn't a big purchase. It was for roughly 100,000 US dollars. She bought a small house like in the countryside, but she was busy and she didn't travel for the closing, and she didn't have arrangements for someone to participate in the closing on her behalf. There was, if I'm not mistaken, probably 6 or 7 years ago. Now she's trying to sell the property, but not surprisingly, now she has another problem in her hands. She doesn't have even possession of the house. She had, just like she told me, like she had a friend taking care of the house, and over time this friend stopped answering to her emails, and now she needs to engage a law firm to see what she can get out of it. Right? So the problem here is there is a legal title for the property, but her name is not on the legal title. She doesn't have a possession, meaning someone else is living at the house. And what she has in her favor, it is like a proof of payments to the seller. And that's from where we would probably start a case on her behalf to try to adjudicate or to force a transfer of title from the prior seller to her. And in addition to that, probably find some type of arrangement with the current tenants so they would leave the house without the need of years-long litigation, right? So that's a cautionary tale that you should do things by the books. Hire an attorney so you have everything done as expected by the Brazilian law, because then in the future, if you decided to sell your property, you're not going to face the same issues that unfortunately this lady is facing as we speak. All right, we have a Kitwell. Hi, Luciana. I'm back from a couple of weeks in Goiânia in Brasilia. I did not have time to get my CPF. I was traveling a lot during the week when the Receita Federal was open, so maybe next time. All right, thank you for sharing it. How was your trip? Did you check on any real estate? Was it for just vacation time? Did you have a good time with your family? I certainly hope so. Annie Ja. Hi, Annie. Annie is saying, hi, do you think there is a restriction on Bangladeshi citizens for a travel visa to Brazil? I'm based in Europe. Any interesting question. So there is no restriction, okay? Like if you check, there is a visa table provided by the Brazilian government. And if you just Google who needs a visa to visit Brazil, eventually you're going to get access to this table that I'm talking about. And you're going to see that there is no restriction on Bangladeshi citizens. This said, not surprisingly, the Brazilian immigration is going to be very thorough whenever you are applying for a visitor visa, just because of the sheer number of Bangladeshi citizens that would probably be, applying for a travel visa, but ending up staying in Brazil. That's pretty much the same thing that we Brazilians face when we try to get a travel visa to the United States. The United States will deny or will decline the vast majority of visitor visas applied by Brazilians for the simple fact that, unfortunately, Brazilians are going to apply for a visitor visa, but guess what? They are going to end up staying in the United States, right? No matter if they just got a travel visa. So here the situation is similar because historically, like Bangladeshi citizens, once they get a visitor visa to Brazil, there is going to be a lot of temptation for this Bangladeshi citizen to stay in Brazil illegally. So what the Brazilian government is going to do, they're going to make it very tough for Bangladeshi citizens to get a visitor visa to Brazil. Now, again, this doesn't mean that there is a ban in place. It just means it is difficult to get the visa. But if you prepare all the paperwork, if you can show that you have strong financials and, more importantly, very strong ties to Bangladesh, there is still a chance that you could secure a visitor visa to Brazil. Didi, hey, good to see you here. Didi, one more friend. Kitwell, Luciano, sorry. All right, no worries there, Kitty. I did work for a U.S. law firm. It was several years ago. And out of the main partners, there was, one of the partners, she was a lady, and she would never write my name correctly. I think because of the pronunciation, she would always write my name with an A at the end, right? And I didn't see any problem. Now, for Brazilians, just so you know, all of you know in general, whenever a name ends in A, it's going to be a feminine name, not a masculine name. So, for instance, Luciano, right? If we're talking about a male, this is going to end in O. So, Luciano with an O at the end. Now, if it is a female, you're going to say Luciana with an A at the end. But no worries at all, okay? I was called Luciana so many times ago. It's a minor typo. No worries there. All right, WS Bill, good to see you, Bill. I was already missing you. Oi, Luciano, have missed you. Yes, Bill, I have been traveling, like around weekends and Wednesdays, so I couldn't get a live stream sooner, but here we are, and so happy to see you guys. Now we have Aaron. Aaron is saying, when marrying a Brazilian, if the gringo is well off, but the Brazilian wouldn't be able to support them, does that present an obstacle to getting a visa and citizenship? Does a child change that? Okay, so if you're marrying a Brazilian, right, let's assume you are from the US or you're from Europe or even, like from India. If you are marrying a Brazilian and you're going to apply for the permanent residency and later on the citizenship, yes, they are going to ask you for proof of financials, but they are usually pretty accommodating, right? Like they're not going to be expecting you to make, I don't know, $5,000 a month or $10,000. I would say that any reasonable amount is going to be enough for the foreign citizen to secure residency in Brazil. Now, if the Brazilian cannot support the foreign citizen and the foreign citizen doesn't have any income at all, that could be a problem, right? Now, the child route is going to be different if the parents are already in Brazil. Because when you are applying for the marriage visa route, there is a presumption that you are probably just passing by Brazil because the first citizen doesn't have a permanent visa, so he's just like visiting for some time, and the immigration has an understanding that the immigration could decline the permanent residency if the foreign citizen doesn't have any income and the Brazilian spouse cannot support the foreign citizen. All right. Now, if there is a child, let's say the couple, meaning a Brazilian spouse and the foreign citizen spouse, if they have a child in Brazil, that's going to change substantially because immigration is not going to want to kick the foreign citizen spouse out of the country if this foreign citizen has a Brazilian child. Okay, so I would say, pretty much anything would work from that perspective. And I mean, you just cannot say, I don't have any income at all. Just show some income and you should be fine. Any job, because I applied for tourist visa earlier, Brazil embassy in Berlin, Germany, and it was rejected. Yes, Annie, that's exactly what I told you, right? It was rejected. It wasn't like if there was a ban, like they wouldn't even let you apply in the first place. So just by you saying that it was declined, it was rejected, you are supporting the understanding that yes, there is a door open, but it's a very narrow door, and they are going to need to deny most of the applications because of the facts that I told you before. Most applicants are unfortunately going to want you to stay in the country. So the Brazilian government, on the other hand, is going to try to be very tough whenever reviewing the financials and the ties between the applicant and their native countries. Okay, now something that works pretty well for immigration into the United States, if you persist, right? Like if you try to go by the books, like show that you have income, that you have, strong links, strong ties to your country, eventually there is a chance that you're gonna be able to secure the visa. Something else for you to know: if you decided to follow, if you are able to follow the real estate investment route, it is possible for you to buy property even from abroad without ever setting a step in Brazil. And after you buy the property, you could start a process in Brazil for the real estate investment visa. And this process would be sent abroad to the consulate in the area of your residence. And this should help a lot because just like we told, if you have, strong financials, meaning that you were able to buy real estate in the country, chances of you securing permanent residency would be very high. Jonathan Macmillan. Hello, Luciano from Jonathan, Illinois. Good to see you here, Jonathan. It has been a while since I saw you live. Good to see you over here. 552, nice haircut, Mr. Oliveira. Thank you so much, 552, for the kind words. I appreciate it. Kitwell, CPF, sorry. Yes, Kit, no worries. I was able to tell it was the CPF. And now Kit is also sharing a tip for those traveling to Brazil with a child. Bring their birth certificate. On many occasions, the passport was not enough because it does not have a parent's names on it. Kit, that's an amazing tip. And just as some background information, Brazilians, for cultural reasons that are beyond, our live stream over here, our cultural background impacts on how minors are able to leave Brazil. So everybody can enter Brazil, but to leave Brazil is another story, right? It reminds me of the Hotel California song, right? You can always check in, but you can never leave, right? Not that bad, but what Kitwell is saying is it does address the fact that the Brazilian Federal Police, they are completely paranoid about letting one of the parents leave the country without the other parent. The concern here is child abduction. We had some, like a very, not advertised, but we had some very famous cases here in Brazil. They took like, a very high spot in our, TV shows, in our news channels, and so it caused some type of change in our PCK, And now, the Brazilian Federal Police, the judiciary, the Brazilian government, like they will all go overboard when trying to assess if a child should be able to leave Brazil. And believe it or not, this is going to apply not only to Brazilian children, but also to children from other countries as well. Okay, so there you go. Make sure to bring your birth certificate for your child. Otherwise, you may have a very hard time to leave Brazil with your kid. Joe Hammersmith. Hello, Mr. Oliveira. Hello, Joe. Good to see you over here. Between João Pessoa and Natal, which city do you prefer? Joe, I had another consultation today, and this person, she was interested. It was a couple. The couple, it was a couple of U.S. citizens and no Brazilians in the loop. And they wanted to buy property in Maceió, Alagoas, and Maceió, João Pessoa, Natal, Fortaleza, they all have something in common. They are capitals of states in the northeast of Brazil. Okay, so João Pessoa is the capital of the state of Paraíba. Natal is the capital of the state of Rio Grande do Norte. Fortaleza is the capital of the state of Ceará. And Maceió is the capital of the state of Alagoas. And so because they are capitals, it means like they are larger cities with a better infrastructure than smaller cities in these states in the northeast of Brazil. They all have also something else in common, like they are close to the beach. They have this kind of, beach town feeling to it. Cost of living is going to be substantially lower than what you would experience in Rio de Janeiro, for instance. And most foreign citizens, they are going to have a blast over there because usually if you're coming with US dollars, if you're coming with euros, your currency is going to be pretty strong and you're going to be able to have a pretty good time without spending too much. Okay, so from that perspective, Joe, I'm not going to say that, João Pessoa or Natal is better than the other. I would say I would prefer Natal because I do have a very significant presence in Fortaleza, Ceará. And Fortaleza, Ceará, surprisingly, is not that far from Natal. So for me to reach Natal is very convenient. Okay, so if I had to choose to have a property in either Natal or João Pessoa, I would pick Natal, but that's just because it is more convenient to me, not because Natal is much better than João Pessoa. My recommendation is for you to experience both cities, and with any of them, any of these two cities, you're going to be just fine, Joe. All right, Jonathan. Jonathan has two questions on a 200,000 and up home purchases in Brazil. How much does fluctuating currency exchange with the US dollar affect home prices and all cash offers? Jonathan, so the currency fluctuation usually it works in brackets. You're gonna see that historically currency exchange in Brazil it doesn't fluctuate a lot. You're gonna see eventual bumps like the last one. The Brazilian currency was pretty stable, like around 5 reais for a dollar for a very long time, and kind of recently, like in the last couple of months, I believe it was bumped to 5.5, 5.6 reais for a dollar. But since there was this bump, you're gonna see that this kind of new floor, if you will, it has been kind of consistent. So once you reach a new bracket or a new range of currency exchange rate, it looks like it tends to remain as is for a while. So that would be my first answer to your question. The second one is like all cash offers. All cash offers are kind of rare in Brazil, particularly for a larger amount properties, because Brazilians in general, we're gonna have access to mortgage, we're gonna have access to finance. So not surprisingly, Brazilians are usually gonna buy a property using finance. Now, for foreign citizens, is usually the exact opposite because you're coming from abroad. You have income from abroad that is difficult for Brazilian banks to understand. You have a credit score that coming from abroad, it has absolutely no meaning to us. It's going to be much more difficult for someone from abroad to get finance. And therefore, usually foreign citizens are going to show up with cash. And then whenever you're buying with cash, you're going to reduce the paperwork on the seller's part dramatically because the seller is not going to be dealing with the finance, right? When you have a buyer who's applying for finance, even though it's the buyer who's getting finance, the seller is going to need to participate because the bank is not going to release the monies unless the bank is 100% confident that this is a good transaction. And therefore, the seller is going to need to participate at a substantial degree in the finance process. So when someone shows up with cash, the seller is going to be more interested and probably willing to give you a break, particularly if you play your cards right. There is a downside from the all cash buyer for a citizen, which is the following: whenever a Brazilian sees a foreign citizen coming with an all cash offer, guess what? They are gonna, like we say in Portuguese, crescer os olhos. All right, they're gonna crescer os olhos. They are gonna think something like this: listen, this gringo, he has a lot of money. You know what? If I was selling to a fellow Brazilian, I know that the fellow Brazilian would be struggling to buy the property, and therefore I'm gonna overcharge the gringo. We see that happening all the time, right? There is a property in the market, I don't know, like for 2 million reais, and then a client of ours comes along, make an offer, say, yes, I'm gonna buy for the price tag, and then believe you or not, some sellers, they are gonna come back and say, you know what, now we were rethinking the offer. It has been the same for a while. We don't want to sell for 2 million reais. We want to sell for 2.1 million reais. That's very sad. That's, of course, like we would never advise our clients to accept something like this. And what we do is we try to educate. We try to educate the seller saying, listen, yes, it's an all cash buyer. But if you increase the price, he's going to feel like you're trying to take advantage of him and he's going to buy elsewhere. So therefore, you better change this mentality and keep the price that you were asking in the first place. Okay, but very common. You see that, the kind of noise whenever there is a foreign citizen, and it's very unfortunate, but I guess it's just a part of life. And as long as you remember that if you show willingness to walk away, you're gonna be in a much better position to negotiate. We see that happening all the time, sometimes with our clients, sometimes with other people who are not our clients. They show that they are desperate for the property. So they have cash instead of, playing their cards, like close it to your body. Don't show your cards, right? Now, if the seller can tell that you are really interested, that you don't want to buy any other property, guess what? A seller who's not really, I'm not sure if the word is honest, but some sellers, they will unfortunately decide to take advantage of a buyer who's too eager to get to the property. All right. So the tip here, play your cards right and show willingness to walk away, and this is going to help a lot with the negotiation process. All right, Joe has a question. Since the parents' names are important when applying for a visa through real estate, would my dad's name be of a concern? He was sentenced a long time ago because of a business fraud case. Joe, yes, your parents' names are going to be very important. However, you have nothing to do with whatever your father did. Okay, so this is a very solid concept in Brazilian law. Children should never be penalized by their parents' actions, right? So just like a comparison, let's say your father was a pretty bad person. I mean, I'm just trying to explain. He was someone working for the cartel, like for a drugs cartel, and he was imprisoned, and he was he had assets seized and so on. As long as your money is not coming from criminal activities related to your father, you're gonna be absolutely fine, because again, this is something very well supported by Brazilian law. Children should never be penalized by their parents' actions. All right. So yes, you will need to show your birth certificate disclosing your parents' names, but despite whatever situation went on with your father, you shouldn't have any issues at all. Another version of this question that we see happening here at the firm sometimes is, not surprisingly, some people, they are not going to have a father's name on the birth certificate for matters related to when the child was born. Maybe the mother was not with the father at the time, or maybe they decided to split for whatever reason. If you don't have a father's name on your birth certificate, you're not gonna be penalized as long as your mother's name does show at the birth certificate. Another concern we discussed today in both consultations, it was about the minimum requirement. This is like just to share about the time aspect of the Brazilian golden visa or the real estate investment visa. We have the same minimum requirement in Brazilian reais since 2018, despite the huge inflation that we have faced over the last 6 years. So, knowing that the current federal administration is not surprisingly trying to increase the government revenues, there is a substantial chance that the minimum requirement for one to qualify for the real estate investment visa is going to increase in the next year or so. All right, just keep that in mind. Now, another variation of this concern, it goes like this. Some people, they are going to want to buy the property now, but they are not going to want to apply for the permanent residency now. And the concern here is, if you buy the property now and you wait a few years to apply for the permanent residency, maybe when it gets to the time of application, the minimum requirement is going to be higher. And I don't think that the Brazilian government would say, well, okay, you bought back in 2024 and the amount was 700 for the Northeast, 1 million for Rio de Janeiro, and therefore we're going to honor the prior requirement, right? That's not how things work. If you don't apply now, if you choose to apply in the future, most probably than not, you're going to face an increased required amount. Okay, so that's a heads up for those of you who are in the planning stage. Joe Hammersmith, thanks for the response. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for joining us today. Very interesting questions. It's always helpful because other people can learn from your experience. I see we have 9 likes already. Thank you all for liking our live stream. This is going to help other people find this content in the future. I really appreciate it. Okay, something new. The Cold War channel. The Cold War channel, welcome the Cold War channel. It has been a while since I saw you last time. It's good to see you over here. The Cold War channel is asking if a digital nomad or even local wants to rent a condo for a year, I've read that a deposit of 3 months' rent is pretty standard. Any advice for vetting and avoiding fraud doing so? So something that it could change, like how many months you're gonna pay as a deposit. Cold War is gonna be whether you have the Brazilian resident card, right? So as a digital nomad or as a retiree or any type of longer term visa that you get in Brazil is gonna give you the so-called RNEMA. RNEMA is the card that you get. Is gonna show your picture on it. There's gonna be like an identification number as a foreign citizen, and this card is gonna help you look like a local because when the landlord sees the card it looks like our IDs, our Brazilian IDs that we Brazilians have. So whenever you have this card, chances are the landlord is not gonna overcharge you when it comes to the deposit. Okay, now if you're showing up with just a passport, not surprisingly, the landlord will get concerned. Maybe I'm gonna let this folk into my home, and then he's gonna travel back to his country. And if something happens to him, then I'm stuck with this rental. And so they are gonna potentially ask for more months as a deposit. And yes, 3 months is kind of usual. If you have a very solid credit score, you could have just a single month as a deposit. And on the other side of the spectrum, I saw, that was the worst case scenario. It was a foreign citizen. They didn't have, the resident card and anything. And it was a really high-end property. And the landlord asked for the full year up front. So the guy, he had to kind of prepay an entire year in order to get access to that premium property. Okay, but it's always up to how bad you want the property. Again, if you show willingness to walk away, 9 times out of 10, like the landlord, the seller, the renter, they are going to be more reasonable because they say, well, maybe not 12 months, but maybe 6 months or 4 months should be enough. But if they see that you are really attached to the property, then it makes more difficult for you to negotiate and get a good deal. But yes, 3 months is usually standard. However, whenever a foreign citizen is in the picture, it usually deviates from the standard. Jonathan Macmillan, thanks as always, Luciano. Excellent. Thank you, Jonathan, for showing up. So good to have you over here. We have another participation here. Play with Pets. Welcome, Play with Pets. I think it's your first time over here. Correct me if I'm wrong. Very happy to have you with us. Can someone with Golden Visa by real estate investment apply for naturalization just by spending minimal physical presence in Brazil 1 week per year? Not really, Play with Pets. As we speak, the requirement is going to be 3 years out of 4 years, meaning that you could travel a lot. You could travel up to 1 year within a 4-year period of time, meaning that you should be in Brazil physically for at least 3 years out of 4 years, okay? Another requirement is going to be the advanced level of Portuguese. And it's not just spoken, it's also written, and there's going to be different types of exams to make sure that you are able to communicate in Portuguese at an advanced level, okay? It doesn't need to be super fluent, nothing nearly close to native, as long as you can have a conversation just like as a foreign citizen, and understand the questions and answer reasonably to the questions that you're going to get in the exam. You should be able to secure the citizenship. Another variation of the citizenship timeline application is going to be available as a fast track for those who are married to a Brazilian or have a child in Brazil. Some of the clients we have here at the firm, they are going to come to Brazil to have a child. We don't assist with the process of coming to Brazil to have a child, because in theory you are misrepresenting the purpose of your travel to Brazil. But like once you have the child, we are more than happy to assist you with the application for the permanent residency. And when you get to the permanent residency through childbirth or marriage to a Brazilian partner, you have access to the so-called fast track. And the fast track works like this: if you stay in Brazil for a full year, you are entitled to apply for the Brazilian citizenship. So, in other words, instead of having to stay in Brazil physically for 3 years out of 4 years, a single year would do it. Okay? Now, not surprisingly, people are never satisfied. And then people are going to say, well, but 1 year is still a lot. I want to stay, like just a week and then come back. And then it doesn't work. When the person has this need to travel abroad for work, for family reasons, for whatever reasons you have, then you're gonna need to work with the regular timeline, which is like 3 years out of 4 years. So some of our clients, they say, I cannot stay for a full year, and therefore they are gonna work with the 3 years out of 4 years. Play with Pets, thanks for the details, appreciate the answer. I'm very happy to be of assistance. Play with Pets. Jonathan McMillan, so if represented by your firm in a house purchase, do you suggest multiple properties bids in one's price range to play against each seller? Yes, like you don't need to necessarily, Jonathan, like to, make offers or bids, and have you like spread out dealing with multiple properties, but it is always nice to have like options, because whenever you have options, the realtors, they are going to be able to tell, like even if you don't tell them that you are considering multiple properties, but they can tell by your behavior. And if you have a properties, I guarantee that sellers are going to be more willing to give you a price break, and it's going to be easier for you to get a good deal. All right, Jonathan. So that's there is realtors. They are usually very street smart. They are not super well educated from a formal perspective. Like in my opinion, okay, my personal opinion, the standards for you to become a realtor in Brazil, they are not super high, and it's not rare for us to find, particularly in the northeast of Brazil, realtors who can barely write anything at all. So you're going to see realtors who are going to be trying to avoid emails. And whenever you're chatting with the realtor over WhatsApp, they're going to be recording voice messages because it's a pain for them to properly write something. I'm not like trying to be mean. I'm just trying to explain the dynamics of the negotiation. Now, they are not formally educated, but on the other hand, they are usually pretty good at being street smart, meaning that they are able to tell if you are very interested or not. They are able to tell if there is room for them to increase the property price and their commissions as well. So that's why I tell you, to play your cards tight. Don't tell them, well, I'm really in love with this house. If I don't buy this house, I'm not going to buy any other house. And it's very unfortunate, because I understand that like buying a property in Brazil is usually something that should bring joy to the buyer, and the buyer is gonna be in this kind of mood, like of doing something pleasant, of buying a property, of acquiring assets in another country. So not surprisingly, buyers sometimes they are gonna lower their guards, and then that's when they're going to be hit with a not good surprise as a price increase. Now, if you like the house, there is nothing wrong, but just tell yourself, don't tell the realtor. Keep this to yourself. If you really love the house, if you really love the apartment, and you don't want to consider any other property at all, keep that to yourself, and you're gonna be able to get better results. And yes, if you have multiple properties in consideration, you can walk away more easily. And once you walk away, we have even here, like at the firm, like we just don't bet on the number of days that a seller is gonna come back, because that wouldn't be nice. But sometimes I'm gonna bet mentally on how many days it's gonna take for a seller to come back to a buyer and say, you know what, I changed my mind. I'm gonna work with the original price, and here it is. Let's move forward, right? Like it's super common for Brazilians to test the willingness of foreign citizens to walk away, right? They're gonna assume, well, this guy, he loves my property. I'm gonna increase the amount, or I'm not gonna give him any breaks. I'm gonna make him pay everything and some. And then if you tell the seller, well, if that's the case, I'm gonna go elsewhere, they are not gonna say no. Come back here on the next day. Usually, it's gonna take, and this is the number that I see happening the most. It's gonna take it then between a week and a couple of weeks to come back. And usually it's gonna be the realtor. The realtor is not gonna say, well, the seller was being a jerk and now he realizes he was being a jerk. The realtor is gonna say something different, like, well, guess what? I have a very good news. I was able to convince the seller to sell for the original price. You see how good I am? I'm really getting a good deal, right? But the point here is, if you give enough time, almost always a bad behavior seller is gonna, repent, and is gonna come back to you with the original price, if not less, right? Like, I mean, for some buyers who are, usually not really attached to the property, let's say they just wanna get the permanent residency through for the real estate acquisition. They say anything goes. I just wanna, I just wanna get the residency in Brazil, and they are gonna usually be better at getting discounts, of getting better pricing, because they don't have attachment to a property, and the realtors can tell. And when the realtors can tell, guess what? They are going to convey this message to the seller, something like this: listen, seller, this guy, he just needs a property to apply for residency, and therefore if he doesn't buy yours, he's going to buy something else. Let's try to get him the best price possible so we can have a deal. All right, that there you go. That's another tip on the multiple properties aspect of a transaction, Jonathan. Aaron is asking, do you have any advice for English speakers wanting to learn enough Portuguese to pass citizenship, a language school, cartoons, children's books, TV, conversations with locals? Aaron, that's an interesting question. Whenever we have a people, like whenever our clients, they are applying for permanent residency in Brazil, and they want to assess how long it's going to take them to achieve this level of fluency, enough for them to pass the exam, I'm going to tell them, listen, the more you live in Brazil, the better it's going to be your learning, because you're going to be learning on the fly, right? Like, you're going to be learning on the fly. You're going to wake up. If you go to a bakery, right? Like in Brazil, we call it padaria, which are super traditional. They come from Portugal. It's not just a bakery. They have, like really nice sandwiches and meals, and all types of, foods that you would buy at a deli in the United States. So whenever you are living in Brazil, you are exposing yourself to the Portuguese language, right? So in my opinion, that's by far the best way for you to learn. Now, if your journey is going to start in the future, something you can do is like to access one of those programs. There are a bunch out there that you're going to pay someone to teach you language over Skype or over Zoom. You're going to be paying sometimes, $10 for a lesson. Sometimes you're going to be paying $20 for a lesson. It depends on the person who's going to be teaching the language. But that's another route for you to consider, okay? I'm not sure, yes, you also need to have a certain level of reading. And if you like, cartoons, or if you like, magazines. Like there is a bunch of Brazilian magazines online that you could read. So I would say a little bit of everything, but the number one route, in my experience, is gonna be when you're living in Brazil. When you need to handle things in Portuguese on a daily basis. There is no workaround. You're gonna have enough exposure to get you to the necessary level of Portuguese. I hope that makes sense. All right. Regarding the Portuguese, right? Since we are talking about Portugal and the Portuguese route, Portugal also has very interesting immigration routes, and something that is always interesting to me is that like Portugal makes easier for people to migrate to Portugal than Brazil. Brazil traditionally has this kind of understanding that Brazil as a country doesn't need to work hard to bring foreign citizens, okay? Either as tourists or, like residents. And this is not my opinion. My opinion, right? Like I work with immigration. I wish, immigrants in general would have, like reasonable, solid routes to come to Brazil and be treated with as much respect as we can provide. Okay, but Brazil in general, they have a different kind of conception. Of course, Brazil is not an entity, but is a country with a cultural background. And whenever we have, like the governments, particularly the federal government, they usually have this kind of mentality. We don't need to work that hard. That's the case of this particular administration, the President Lula administration. The upside is that President Lula is always very aggressive in terms of saying, don't mistreat Brazil. We are not a third world country. So President Lula gets us a lot of, self-respect. He's a leader from this perspective, right? He says, listen, Brazil, France, United States, we are all on the same level. That's President Lula approach, and I respect that. Now, from the immigration framework, the trend with President Lula administration is to make things more difficult to foreign citizens, right? Something interesting because we're talking a little bit about politics. All the modern visas that you guys discuss here in this channel nowadays, they were created by the prior federal administration, President Bolsonaro administration. So digital nomad visa, President Bolsonaro. Retirement visa, President Bolsonaro. Real estate investment visa, President Bolsonaro, right? So they were all created under President Bolsonaro, who had a different concept of how to bring a foreign citizens to Brazil, right? Like, let's open the doors, let's have, well regulated routes, tracks for foreign citizens to come to Brazil, live their lives, and in the process, help develop Brazil by bringing, foreign currency, expertise in different areas. So there you go with the different scenarios. Aaron says, pão de queijo. All right, I can see that Aaron is already practicing not only, Brazilian Portuguese, but also Brazilian culture. Pão de queijo, it's it's usually a round piece of bread, a rounded piece of bread infused or made with cheese in the process. And it has a very particular taste and consistency. Okay, it's not just cheese bread. Trust me, cheese bread is not a good translation. It's a piece of bread that has some elements of cheese on it, but the consistency and the style and the appearance of this bread is very particular, and it's very cherished by Brazilians in general. It was originated in the state of Minas Gerais, but nowadays you can find anywhere you go in Brazil, no matter which state. All right, so just talking again about Portugal. So even though with President Bolsonaro, Brazil, took large steps in order to modernize the Brazilian immigration framework. Not surprisingly, Portugal, most probably because of the European Union, they have an amazing framework with so many different routes for someone to immigrate and to live in Portugal and to become a Portugal citizen if the person chooses so. They are usually they usually have lesser requirements. So if you take, I think it's the D7, which is the passive income visa from Portugal. I think you just need something around like a minimum wage or 1.5 times the minimum wage, which in Portugal right now, if I'm not mistaken, is just 820 euros. So usually with less money, you're gonna be able to get the retiree visa. In Brazil, it's gonna be $2,000. Okay, so it's gonna be a little bit more, and the paperwork that you need to show to Brazil, I think, is also more cumbersome. You're gonna face more bureaucracy and more red tape, right? That's gonna be my take when comparing Brazil to Portugal. Another perspective for you guys, I'm sure you know that Brazil was colonized by Portugal, and that's why you speak Portuguese and not Spanish in Brazil. And therefore, there is always a very close relationship between Brazilians and Portuguese people. And that's one of the reasons why Brazilians, they don't need a visa to visit Portugal. We have, special types of access in Portugal, like we get a resident card almost automatically. And, we can also, of course, communicate well with the Portuguese people, even though Portuguese from Brazil is not the same Portuguese that you speak in Portugal, but we can understand each other, all right? And because of that, we also gonna be expanding our services to Portugal probably towards the end of 2024 or beginning of 2025, and you guys are gonna have another possibility for your digital nomad plans or retirement plans, or even additional citizenships, if you will. Ronnie Dio says, I finally got the documents from Santander to start the process. That's good to know, Ronnie. So yes, we spoke about Santander. Santander is usually a Brazilian bank, and it's actually a Spaniard, right? It's not a Spanish, it's a Spaniard because it comes from Spain. A Spaniard bank with a large presence in Brazil, and they have this vocation as an international bank. Out of the Brazilian banks, Santander is always a good choice. Like if you want to get a bank account before securing the Brazilian ID card. Okay, if you go to Bradesco, if you go to Itaú, if you go to most banks with just your passport, they're gonna say, listen, unfortunately, I cannot open a bank account. Once you get the resident card, come back and then we're gonna talk. Listen, we're gonna talk. I'm not saying they're gonna open the bank account. Unfortunately, even when you get the resident card, some banks, they're gonna give you a hard time. But if you get the resident card, it's almost guaranteed. Like you can go to a couple of banks, and one of the banks, they are gonna open the bank account for you. But here, what Ronnie Dio is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Ronnie, you're probably talking about opening a bank account even before securing the resident card in Brazil. And if that's the case, you need to go through the non-resident bank account, which is a very special type of bank account in Brazil that is usually more costly and it has less features, but it does allow you to have some financial presence in the country even before you get the resident card. Aaron is joking here. It looks like so we can bring our Brazilian wives to Portugal and enjoy the whole European Union. They would be pleased. Yes, Brazilians usually have a blast when we go to Europe. And nowadays in the European Union, like you do have some checkpoints, but most of the time, like if you take a train and you're gonna go across, Spain, France, whatever you're going. Usually nobody's gonna be chasing you for a passport, but you do need to have, for instance, proper insurance to visit other countries. Like we Brazilians, we don't need insurance to visit Portugal, but we do need like travel insurance when visiting the UK, for instance, when we are visiting France, for instance, right? So just make sure that even though we do have access to other countries because there are no actual barriers between the countries, you may need to meet specific requirements depending on the country. WSBU, Luciano, is there any way to locate an old friend in Rio? All I have is a name. All I have is a name, like directories, phone books, and so on. So, Bill, unfortunately, in Rio de Janeiro, like the registries, they are not super organized. They are not really properly organized. If you are in a different state, you could most probably find, registries from your friend through, like a birth certificate or property owned by your friend. Another thing that someone could do, like if you have the name, a person could search for lawsuits, hopefully not that many, with your friend's name. Once they find the CPF attached to a lawsuit, a CPF could be used to get a credit report, and in the credit report, potentially find the current address for your friend. Most probably than not, you will need two things. You will need like a professional service provider to assist you with this search, and the second thing, you will need probably a good reason to find the friend, so the professional service provider is going to feel comfortable to retrieve information for a probable current address for your friend. So this is feasible in theory. Downside is probably the cost. Like nobody's going to want to undertake a search like this one without charging you like as a regular legal case. So it may be expensive, Bill. But yes, I think this is doable. Particularly if you are locally in Brazil, you always have a better chances of finding a better priced service provider. All right, we are approaching the 1 hour mark for our live stream. We're gonna take an additional couple of questions, and then next time we're gonna be together. It's gonna be on Wednesday. So yes, we're gonna be together this Wednesday as well. We're gonna be together on Wednesday, July the 31st. Remember that on Wednesdays we're gonna meet at 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time, right? On Sundays we meet at 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. On Wednesdays we're gonna meet on an earlier time, which is gonna be 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. All right, so make sure you go to our channel, you click on notify me, so when our live stream is gonna start, you're gonna be alerted about the live stream, and you're gonna be able to participate just like you're doing right now. Okay, Play with Pets. Wondering if you have any insights about Mercosur. How similar is Mercosur to European Union, freedoms of movement? Can citizens of one member country easily move to another member country? Play with Pets. Yes, there is a provision allowing, and if I'm not mistaken, it's on a country by country basis. Because even though there is the Mercosur, for those who do not know, Mercosur is the equivalent to the European Union in South America, right? So we have like Paraguay, we have Uruguay as members of the Mercosur. However, we also have some disputes going on. Argentina is kind of, it doesn't have a good relationship with Brazil right now. Brazil has a federal administration that is way to the left, and Argentina is the opposite. The political orientation of Argentina, it's way to the right. So not surprisingly, they are not really working along too well, and therefore you have like different categories of Mercosur countries. You have like the real members, and then you have some of them who are interested in the team, and then you have some that are working more as spectators than real Mercosur participants. But yes, there is something similar, but because of those things I just told you right now, they don't really work as the European Union. European Union has, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 27 countries, right? Brazil, we're talking maybe about 3 to 4 countries in which you're gonna have, the freedom of movement. So 3 to 4, comparing to Europe, 27 countries is not like comparable in reality. But yes, there is more Mercosur, and for those of you who do not know, is the concept is similar to the European Union, and Brazil has always taken on the leadership to try to develop a Mercosur to strengthen our position as a world leader, and not only our position as a country, but also the continent as well. But that's a very interesting topic. WS Bill, thumbs up. Marisa Navas, thank you so much, Marisa. I see Marisa Navas, but I can tell Ricardo is in the picture as well. So good to see you guys over here. I also have friends of mine, family as well, participating in the live stream. So good to see people that I love over here. And that's gonna be it for today. I really appreciate your participation. If you haven't done so, please like our live stream, and I hope to see you next Wednesday. You guys have a blessed rest of your Sunday.